Hello, everyone. Let's wait a minute for people to join. Then we're gonna start. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Great to have you join us for another edition of Detection Highlights. This one is gonna be with a stronger threat intelligence twist. A couple of quick housekeeping items at the very start this time. The session is being recorded and will be shared afterwards. Slides and resource links will be included. And we have time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to type your questions in the chat at any time. So hopefully, again, this will be a useful hour of insight for everyone tuning in. So to be fair, we have always been connected to threat intel by nature. So the detections, as you know, our labs team releasing often based on either customer feedback, so from the front lines of the defense, or the threat research our labs team is constantly doing. And to operationalize the output of this sandbox detection logic, you really need good CTI as kind of the bridge. And in fact, as we head toward 2026, you will see us framing more of these updates from a CTI perspective. It may include updates around our threat intel feed, unique signal as well. And it's really our way of connecting malware behavior to bigger campaign patterns, like targeted geographies and attacker infrastructure, and so on. We're going to speak about that today. Fatih is with us today to speak more about that from VMRay team. Some insights around Stealer malware ecosystem he's going to touch on. And of course, we are excited to be joined by a special guest, Marcus Ludwig from Tikura. Marcus, he brings decades of CTI experience and will share some practical insights from the field, including how to build threat intel tooling with detection in mind. Hello, Marcus.
Hello, Ertu. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So I'm gonna get started straight with new VMRay threat identifiers. A snapshot without really taking too much time. I highly recommend reading our blog post we publish if you would like to see the whole batch of updates from Yara rules to VTIs. So in this webinar, just we care about the time, so we are going through some highlights, as you know. So three of them I'm going to share right now. The first one is a VTI, a low score VTI around the sample checking for mouse movement via API calls. It might be trying to detect real user interaction, which could be an anti-analysis technique, something we will definitely monitor, among other samples. Second one is about typo-squatted domains. As you may know, the platform does smart link detonation. It decides whether to auto-detonate URLs in things like PDFs or emails. Now, if a domain looks like a typo-squat, don't want to give attackers ideas, but you can see examples here. That's a new trigger condition. So, and we also added a VTI around it on top of the SLD smart link detonation logic. That being said, this one can get a bit funny with edge cases. So again, we will keep an eye on false positives. And I think Marcus is gonna share mention how to monitor these type of new detections and yeah, keep an eye on false positives as well. So it's kind of a spoiler. And next one, quite an interesting move. The malware doesn't want the host to sleep or hibernate. It messes with power CFG, if you're familiar, to keep the machine alive. I mean, it's likely to keep its malicious process running uninterrupted. So this is actually mapped to a MITRE technique, power settings. And from our end, it's a 2 out of 5 score for now, since again, some legit software can do this too. Also, it leads us right into info stealers because this behavior was observed in a Radamantis sample, as you may know, which was part of recent Operation Endgame takedown by law enforcement. So this was kind of a quick overview around the new VTIs. We're gonna move on. A quick stop at Euro rules. As always, our labs team has been rolling out new rules like backdoors, loaders, ransomware. So these kind of usual suspects we track month to month. So what I would like to call out though is the new set of rules around the backdoored npm packages. You've probably seen the headlines. These are important, especially from an incident response perspective. And just yesterday, I think GitLab disclosed another npm-based supply chain attack. So this vector is kind of hot. We have got links in the resources if you want to dive deeper. So we are adding not only around the malware families, but around these kind of techniques. We are adding Yara rules as well. Moving into config extractors. It's an overview because Fatih is going to walk us through these both from the sandbox angle as well as within our new unique signal feed. We mentioned Radamantis earlier. You know, the infrastructure was recently disrupted under the operation, but let's be honest, these things rarely disappear for good. Either they resurface or other families rush in to fill the gap. So it becomes really priority to watch the lesser known stealer families like these ones that you see on the screen. Right now we have extractors for these, allowing us to extract high confidence IOCs from samples that might otherwise slip under the radar. I think it's a good connection point to Marcus from now on. We would like to switch gears really a bit because collecting IOCs is just one part. The real challenge is most of the time operationalizing them. And that's where really Marcus comes in, some do's and don'ts. He's been working hands-on with CTI teams across different organizations and helping them make these actionable. And one thing I really appreciate, he brings numbers, so not just opinions. So yeah, at this point, I would like to say, Marcus, over to you.
Thank you. So let me try to share my screen now. Here we go. So hopefully that has worked out well.
Yes.
Can see the, okay, perfect. All right. So again, thanks for inviting me here. Let's see how much I can attribute to the intelligence we are talking about. But before I start digging or going into the rabbit hole of speed versus context in operational threat intel, let me quickly talk a little bit about myself and Ticura. So again, Markus Ludwig, 46 years old. I'm right out of the middle of Germany, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ticura. I'm working in cybersecurity since a little bit more than 20 years now already. formerly worked for Internet Security Systems, IBM's X-Force Threat Intel team. And with PQRA, which stands for Threat Intelligence Curation, so the name actually makes sense if you know that. What we do is curating and optimizing threat intelligence for organizations, mainly MSSPs. And we do that with a new approach by real-time correlation and enrichment and normalization of intelligence, identifying what is noise in there. We are, we are not a tip, I can say that one at this point in time. In the next slides, I will have quite a bunch of numbers. And if you ask yourself, where do those numbers come from? They are based on our core analytics, which as of today means we are processing something like 1,100 threat intel sources continuously. And the numbers are based on that, just so you understand where those numbers come from. All right, so actually, when it comes to this conversation, speed versus context, this is a little bit like a discussion that you can compare to spaces versus tubs in programming. Is it more important to be fast, or is it more important to have more context when it comes to operational intel? That's the two competing philosophies I'm facing in conversations since ever, right? The question we are looking at is, should I accept a higher risk while waiting for attribution, or accept more false positives but be faster on coverage? So it's a challenge. Those competing philosophies are around time to protection versus the contextual confidence that I can gain, right? And to be clear, at this point in time already, I can tell you there is no right or wrong, in my opinion. It really always depends on what is my main use case, what are my priorities. So do I watch my house burning down while I wait for context and the ransomware already spreads and I lost all my organizational assets, or do I burn my people with low severity alerts that flood my SOC, right? So if we look at the average time, the ransomware spread across organizations, 0 days are even faster every month, at least to some degree. On the other hand, if you look at the time difference between an initial IOC sighting that could cover and the time it takes till real attribution is there, that can average between 6 and 44 hours between the first sighting and the first attribution. On the other hand, we have the false positive reduction problem, right? So if I have IOCs and use them without any information, it often means I end up with a lot of low severity alerts. WIS, for example, already just enrichment and contextualization can lower the false positive rate by 60 to 80%, which is a huge number when it comes to operational intelligence. So what do we do, right? How much context can we actually wait for? And now I want to bring or shed some light on another aspect when it comes to attribution and context. Let's have a look at labeling and enrichment from a global perspective. So we currently know a little bit more than 877 million distinct indicators from all those sources that we monitor. Across all those indicators, we only know 712,000 meaningful labels. That means something that is framework specific, that is classified or based on a catalog like Malpedia or Myth Galaxies or MITRE information. So labels that you can use industry-wide across all practices. On the other hand, we know more than 5 million labels, which are rather seen as questionable value, generic labels, vendor-specific labels, something totally unspecific. So just looking, what I want to say is just looking at, does a threat intel source or an indicator come with labels or enrichments or context or text, however you want to call it, doesn't necessarily mean that this is a higher confidence information. It doesn't mean that I can action on that easily, right? I still need to understand what are labels that I can really make use out of, which are really valuable. In total, and you can see I just added a table here with our analysis over 30 days based on types of indicators like domain hashes and so on. And we looked at the new IOCs, the total number of new IOCs, how many come with a label actually, how many are labeled immediately and how many are labeled later. And what you can see is only a small percentage ever gets any label. Now, on the domain part, I have to say the percentage is very high compared to the other types of indicators. That is because you have a lot of information from DGAs. And DGAs are typically per nature labeled and are actually pre-calculated domains. It's questionable how much you can actually go with those numbers, but the overall message is most of the indicators that we see are not labeled at all. And if they are labeled, even if they are labeled later, the time till they are labeled can average between 6 hours or even months, if you look at the maximum column here. Story is actually, it's really important to understand the shortcomings of enrichments and understanding how good a threat intel source is when it comes to labels and enrichments makes a huge difference on your CTI practice. Let me give you another example. I brought you one concrete example. On the left, you will see a file hash. That file hash is known since July and has been seen across 8 sources. 8 different threat intel sources had some sightings, and the reality is they don't provide any contacts. They don't provide any MITRE information or actor or family name or whatever. So do you ignore that indicator now? Should you ignore that if it's such a long-living indicator, or should you take care about it? On the other hand, you have something completely different. It's a file hash that is only known since I don't know, something like 6 days or so across 6 sources. It comes with family names, with MITRE information, with that, right? So that means you cannot rely on anything except if you measure that. That's a story here, right? Now, talking about context and enrichments does also open a door. If you understand how good a CTI source is for certain types of enrichments or come with certain types of enrichments, and you understand what labels, enrichments, context, attribution does really help you in your day-to-day business in whatever use case you have, like, are you sitting in front of an EDR? Are you actually a threat hunter? Are you a malware reverse engineer? So whatever role you have, whatever your use case is, if you understand what is the level of context that helps you, you can start analyzing sources and try to combine them to maximize the context. That is one of the measurements that we have typically to use when it comes to optimization, right? So one source might only understand an IOC and a first scene date. The next one has a confidence information. The next one has maybe a risk information, malware names, actors, industries, reference URLs. And you can combine them if they have a certain amount of overlap, of course. Okay, so in the end, every team needs to understand what the priorities are and for which use case. But let's look at one of the typically more balanced approaches, something that helps to find your middle ground. Um, it starts with a multi-tier approach. So you don't action immediately. Maybe rather log and monitor or track them or raise even lower priority alerts. On the next level, you start doing continuous enrichment. Look at sources that provide more context, but maybe they are not that fast. Maybe you do own enrichments. Um, Especially in large organizations, you typically end up with a lot of own internal intel that you can use to correlate. You can start correlating on other existing campaigns based on behavioral patterns like footprints or something like that. And the third one is actually, as soon as you have full context, you can use that intelligence for full automation, like in playbooks or yeah, block quarantine. That is one of those approaches that you typically can find. What does that mean? Yeah, let's jump into a short recap. Um, it can be an answer for this dilemma by looking at threat intelligence as a temporal. Means go in and say this all intelligence has its value, but be sure that you action by the level of confidence that you can gain. Use early indicators and then enrich continuously to escalate progressively. Make sure that you have some feedback loops in there. And be dynamic on the confidence level, right? The more context you can get, the more enrichments you can attach, the higher the confidence gets. Last but not least, and this is one of the shortages or gaps that we see across so many CTI lifecycle management, measurement. Measure what matters. As soon as you have defined or you are aware of what is really valuable intelligence, what is necessary for your use case, you need to start measuring. What is the speed of protection, like time to first protection indicators to protect, and then how quickly can you actually gain more insights? What is the false positive rate? Already, this information continuously measured in metrics will help you to understand and optimize your threat intelligence practice over the time. And also understanding what is the noise rate across sources. What are labels that actually help you or are without any meaning? All these will help you to get better on actually balancing out the protection and detection versus contextualization and false positive prevention. That's actually it. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any comments.
Yeah, we are gonna get questions at the end, Marcus.
Perfect.
Thank
Awesome.
you, and for these great insights. and I think you touched on some everlasting, never-ending questions, like, what to do with that IOC, depending on use case, depending on the priority. I think that's the first thing to clarify. And on that note, I think you made a good note around the label inflation. So I think there is such a thing. I mean, context is good. Labels could be a clues around that context, but at the end of the day, it's really overall what you can expect from a thread intel feed is directly related to the use case or your prioritized use case even. I think it was a great overview, and thank you for that. Now we will pass it on to Fatih to tell us what he sees on the unique signal front. And also, right now we have two fronts actually. So we are adding new detection logic, new configuration extractors, new Yara rules on the sandbox front. But on the other hand, on the unique signal front, you can get well curated, eliminated from false positives and all that stuff, and easily consumable, ready to automate thread intel feed. And on that front, also, we are able to showcase what you can get in terms of context that you get from sandbox analysis. So, yeah, without talking more, I would like to pass it on to Fatih.
Thank you very much, Arturo. And thank you, Marcus, for sharing some great insights around the threat intelligence and how the security teams currently are dealing with trying to wait for more context around the piece of intelligence and not being able to respond properly until that context comes. And also at the same time, the timeliness of that piece of information is extremely important. And again, as Arturo stated, we are building products in both fronts on providing more context in an automated manner through this new product that we call Unique Signal, which is a threat intelligence feed. And in there, we're utilizing VMRay platform's threat analysis capabilities at its core. So that gives us a lot of visibility into the behavior of malware that is frequently seen in the wild or more relevant at any point in time. And we do this on a scale, on a high volume, and we have a really good amount of visibility into what's happening in the threat landscape with the malware goggles. And today, my part of the presentation is going to be more practical around how this piece of information could be delivered to you and what is the behind the scenes when a threat intelligence vendor is actually trying to come up with some understanding into what's happening on a piece of sample. And I'd like to start with a visualization through OpenCTI's dashboarding capabilities. And in there, OpenCTI is an open source product that is able to ingest many different with many different feeds in many different formats. And in this case, we are distributing our threat intelligence through the name Unique Signal, and OpenCTI is able to make a good representation of the data that we have because of their 6.2.1 support. And in there, currently, what you're seeing in your screens is 1 week of intelligence delivered through VMRay Unique Signal. And in there, of course, there are some visualizations a little bit cut in half. But what it says is that it's generally delivering around 500 analysis reports per day, which comes with around 3,500 indicators averagely. And with all this, to be able to tie the story to each other, to double down on that context claim that we have, we're distributing a lot of relationship objects to tie the indicators to each other so that once there is an indicator that is related to another indicator that was observed to be in the same analysis in the VMRay platform, you would be able to pivot around. Once you see one indicator match in your event sources, you can see, hey, what do I know about that indicator, or what other indicators are related to that attack, that campaign. And certainly we're trying to make this context more visible and more pivotable. And in there, we not only give these relationship objects to just tie random hashes or IP addresses to each other, but also what we do is to attach that behavioral information that VMRay is expert on monitoring, and map that to MITRE-ATT&CK corpus through MITRE-ATT&CK technique IDs, and then just give you what is actually this indicator related to. And on the right side of your screen, you can see the top kill chains. That's the more frequent the behavior is visible, the more it will be on the top, on the higher levels of this visualization. And in there, the highest one is the defense evasion, and this is actually is tying to the story of VMRay platform, where the evasion resistancy of it is actually playing a really important role in here, where if the threat analysis platform was not able to understand that it is being evaded by the malware, not only that behavior is going to be missed, that evasion behavior is going to be missed, but all the other later stages in that malware campaign is going to be missed as well, because at that point in time, if the malware is able to evade the threat analysis solution, then it's going to probably, in most of the scenarios, stop executing right there and then, and won't show any real behavior after that point. And this is certainly not the case. As you can see, we are seeing such a high occurrence of defense evasion in the malware samples that we analyze. And this is a really important factor to consider on how much later stages of visibility any threat intelligence vendor is able to give. And we not only give that level of enrichment into the indicator level, but we also know more than 60% of the time what malware family this indicator is classified with, right? So we are able to analyze many different type of malware families, and in the last week alone, we've shipped around more than 70 different malware families. And in there, you can see there's, of course, some of them have a higher percentage in the entire share, but you will be able to understand, see the different occurrences of different malware families, really being actively involved into active campaigns that are running in the threat landscape in the wild, right? We can also give in some scenarios what is the country that this particular indicator is targeting to, right? And we do this via these passive DNS enrichments, and in there we can understand how many times a certain domain address being tried to be resolved, right? And in that scenario, we know that probably that IP addresses that is trying to resolve that domain name that is probably attached to a C2 in a malware, a C2 address in a malware, is already infected or being targeted. So that this is a really important piece of information that can be utilized to filter out or prioritize the threats that you try to be involved with, right? And again, on the label side too, we give a lot more enrichments, right? And these are the labels that are attached to an indicator object. And in there, you can see the MITRE-ATT&CK technique IDs, the human readable explanation or description of what behavior this particular indicator is related to, and also the threat name, the threat type. Is it a Trojan or is it an injector? And what malware family it is. Is it a KR banker or some Blyhunt stealer or any kind of other thing that we were able to monitor? We're going to include that information indicator in the indicators that we ship. And most of the indicators, when it comes to confidence, VMRay has been notoriously well known about trying to double down on not creating false positive, both in the sandbox, in the threat analysis platform, and also in the threat intelligence that we generate. And we're trying to put an extreme care on not being able to tip a false positive in the automated alert enrichment and alert generation scenarios in the SIEMs or EDRs, right? And you can here see that most of the indicators having the highest confidence so that you can be more confident about what comes from this feed in enabling different use cases, like, again, alert generation and maybe even blocking that indicator on the parameter. And this is a high-level view of what Unique Signal provides. And in the VMRay platform, for the people that are used to the user interface of VMRay platform, here we analyzed an executable file. And we were able to successfully classify this as shard stealer. And in here, it is, doing a lot of evasion attempts. And here you can see it's trying to sleep, right? And our anti-sleep mechanism was able to detect this. And we were able to skip 11 minutes of time and truncate it into 31 seconds. And we were able to see all of the malicious behavior that this particular sample is trying to achieve, right? And here we not only have the static rules that are matched on the sample, that probably coming with Yara and reputation, but we also have a lot of dynamic behavioral visibility. And this just plays a huge role into what you're responding to. If you had all of these informations on a piece of hash or a URL, that means you definitely are dealing with something that is really malicious, and you're not leaving your fate to the vendor and just trusting them saying it's malicious and not even knowing what the reason is behind. So it is a stealer. It's just trying to exfiltrate data and trying to get a lot of things from the clipboard. And again, input capture, same thing goes on over there. Some evasion attempts are continuing. It's trying to access physical drive directly, delaying the execution, as we mentioned earlier. And it just sends control codes to your driver. And there's not only these, of course, behavior, but also a lot of other things around the network on performing a DNS request to a particular domain. And we are able to get all this visibility under like 4 minutes. And we not only see all of these things, but again, in malware, as you know, some of the malware authors, they embed a configuration into their sample so that they can change those configurations in different campaigns or scenarios, or maybe even attacking different endpoints or organizations, but using the same piece of code. And in there, we were able to extract all the malware configurations from that sample. We know what encryption key it's using, what is the algorithm behind it, what URL it is trying to attach, or connect to get the secondary stages of the same attack, and also some other stuff around contract functions. And these are all things that is depending on the style of the attack, actually, and it's just going to be a tailor-made for every version of the sort of malware family. We not only see the old sample execution, but again, doubling down on that threat, the MITRE ATT&CK technique mapping, we are able to see and map it to different technique IDs through our behavioral rules, right? We can go ahead and double down on some of the things over here, but I'm gonna skip into the network section to show you like one more sample here. Again, as you know, Shark Stealer is a stealer. It just tries to capture the inputs from the clipboard and just tries to collect a lot of data from the endpoints that it is infecting. But here we also see which countries it is trying to connect to, what is happening in the TCP session, and what is being sent actually in the PCAP stream, and what kind of function logs that this particular behavior was tied to. And as you can see, all of these details are available for you to navigate and try to understand more about the nature of this threat. But of course, without going into that detail, to enable another use case of the CTI teams or SOC teams trying to utilize this data in a different modality, in a different setting, in threat intelligence platforms, or again, SIEMs or EDRs, you need to have this data in a different structure. And in here, unique signal solves this by, sending it through multiple different formats like 6.2.1. And in here, you're seeing an example of the same report, but in a different product, right? We have, through this analysis report, we have two particular indicators, and in there, we are able to see all of the behavior that it is attached to and all the different things that we know about this. It's a shark stealer. It's also using some other combinations of hijack loader, and it tries to inject into the memory of another process, which is also a very malicious thing. So when you look at the entities that is attached to, you get a piece of indicator, not only knowing what this is, like with a high confidence, but you also know what type of operation it does. What is the kill chains that it's attached to? And what are the other things that I need to know about this particular indicator? So it's not just saying, hey, this hash is malicious. There's a lot of story behind it. And going to another example in VMRay platform, this time it's the deer stealer. It's again, a stealer, again, uses another hijack loader. They try to utilize and mix and match of these things. And again, it does injection, does like take screenshots through the API of Windows API, and also does network connection to upload those data that it was stealing. And in this case, it's a large amount of data. And over here, this is the timeline of the processes in that analysis. So it creates by creating an MSI exec.exe, and then goes on to the final stages where it does a lot of injections to its even child processes to evade some of the detection over there, right? And here we see the MITRE ATT&CK matrix light up like a Christmas tree, where we were able to get a lot of information about this malware family in a couple of minutes. And of course, having all of these data in a different format, again, has a lot of value. And in here, we have a couple of similar reports that are tied to each other, which again allows you to have a pivoting capability. But in here, through the relationship object, we tie the indicators that we've observed in that analysis in the VMRay platform and tie it to that report object. And in under the entities section, which could be a different part in different platforms, you can see all the indicators that we think is relevant for this. And here we have the deer stealer indicator, and it does, again, evasion, right? And having said that, we again have a lot of information around the labels, and also clearly stating to you what this particular indicator is relevant to. It's an entry point of injection. It modifies the control flow of a process, start from created or modified executable, right? So these are all of the things that you can look at, analyze, and understand how malicious it is. And in this case, again, it's a really high score. And it's tied to different observable objects and, some malware families in here as well. But again, here, I think we've done a good job on explaining to you how having these different type of data in various different use cases. In instant response, you may be needing much more detail on the host-related artifacts, but in the CTI use cases, maybe having what malware family it is, what kind of operation does it do on a high level, and what kind of technique IDs is it related to, and what industry it is targeting, and what kind of geographical context can I expect from this is really, really valuable. And hopefully, when these feeds are operationalized, it will provide its value by giving you a high confidence and really high and detailed amount of information on a case that is generated by it. And with that, I think I'd like to conclude my part of the presentation, and maybe we can answer some questions passing
Yeah,
it back
we'll
to you,
we'll
Arturo.
move on to the Q&A, Fatih. But before that, I would like to just turn to Marcus again. I think that was a great one. So from, from the kitchen and the deep into the kitchen, from the detection, new detections, we were able to provide a broader perspective to CTI and how it can be consumed. And through that, of course, there was a sandbox and deep analysis stage. So Marcus, I think uniqueness is also one of the criteria for many CTI teams when they evaluate, I mean, you emphasized how important measurement is, but actually, uh, it is something possible. It's not something that's important. It's also possible, right? You can measure it, and probably you can shine a light a little bit on Tikura's position, how to measure uniqueness, um,
Yeah,
about analytics.
yeah, good point. So normally you would expect that uniqueness might be rather pointing to a false positive or wrong information, but the reality is um, when we look at all those 1,000 plus sources, all those sources have their sweet spot on what they are good at doing or observing or preventing. And uniqueness is a good indication how much they cover that nobody else is seeing, right? And every larger organization has that uniqueness. In that case, just to explain that, we differentiate between the coverage, the pure coverage, then how timely coverage is, and timeliness means other sources also have seen that, but later than the original source, than the first source. And then we have uniqueness. That means I have information available that nobody else has seen, right? Especially when it comes to malware and the approach that you follow with VMRay, detonating malware, observing the indicators, and then bringing that out in a threat intel feed means you have a lot of information very early, but with the context of that malware. And that means you're actually already balancing out between being fast and having context. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to have that wider perspective while trying to measure the effectiveness of the feed is kind of coming into play as an important aspect, right? All right, so let me quickly share the resources. So as you know, we're sharing the resources with you, and right after this session, you can check out the here some links and also some public sandbox reports. We have threat feed portal, so you can access shark stealer, umbrella stealers public sandbox report that some of them Fatih was able to go through. And also one other note around the points and data that Marcus shared. We are gonna share a blog post that Marcus has penned, and so you can take a look again. You can write, you can read out at your own time. And yeah, I mean we can jump into the Q&A. I think here I've got a couple of questions. Uh, so to Marcus, you mentioned earlier that Tikura ingests, analyzes intel from over 1,000 sources. I mean, how are you objectively comparing those feeds? So I think you mentioned that already, the scoring, but is there a scoring system? And I think you mentioned already timeliness, uniqueness, but probably you can cover that again.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So there are many different things that we consider. Um, First and foremost, we think threat intelligence cannot just be measured objectively and then recommended. It also needs a second aspect, and that is the relevance to a customer use case. That means measuring those sources is mainly by observing what information do they provide, at which point in time, how fast are they, how much noise do they include, means false positive potentials. We are tracking a little bit more than 20 different categories of false positives or noise, however you want to call that. And then we look at things at their maturity. How often do they provide information that is not parsable, and so on? How often do they provide updates? And then we look at the global view of threat intelligence. For example, we observe all trending threats and emerging threats across all those 1,100 sources. Look at those that seem to be valid threats, not just generic names, and then see how much coverage a source has compared to the overall threat landscape. So, and how quickly they provide information. And then we look at the customer use case and say, okay, you're a bank in the US and you are globally active. So these are the top trending threats that are related to you. Things like that. Right.
Amazing. And I bet this is all kind of coming from, your experience, your background, coming from front lines of CTI world. So kind of all distilled into this platform is able to measure and compare the feeds, and that would be useful for customers, right? Organizations of all sizes. Amazing. So another question, I think Fatih can take this one, but how easy is it to integrate unique signal with the threat intel stack? I mean, I think you touched on Stix Taxi, but would you like to take it?
Yeah, perfect question. It's very easy, and we tried our best to keep it that way. And of course, in a world where you expect Stix to be an accepted and well supported format by different or various threat intelligence platform providers, that wasn't reality. But we heard that we were learned it the hard way, and we tried to religiously stick on the Stix 2.1 format at the same time, keeping the level of better integration with various different platforms that is not able to parse all the parts of the information that we were just presenting. So across the stack, we try to keep it very smooth and very easy to integrate. By just entering a couple of credentials to your threat intelligence platform, you're going to be able to ingest the data right away.
Amazing. Yeah, we're gonna religiously stick to Stix and Taxi for sure. All right, that brings us to the end of today's session. Big thanks to you guys, Marcus, Fatih, and to the audience. Thanks for joining again. If you find this helpful, really, we would love you to drop us a note on LinkedIn or send feedback directly. So we are always iterating these sessions based on your input. And mark your calendars. We'll have a couple of more webinars this year. One is around MISP unique signal integration. It will be soon. Another one, year-end version of the detection webinar. And if you're heading somehow to Black Hat in Riyadh or in London, feel free to connect us there. You can find our booth. And again, thanks for joining, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.